Hey, hi, this is Mr. Sekoder. I have recently accepted an offer from Amazon for SDE 1 job role. So in this video, I want to share my interview experience. So without wasting your time, let's get to it. I'm going to start this video by explaining a bit about me, and then we'll look at the whole interview process timeline, and I'll share my interview preparation, and finally we'll end this video with some tips. So at the time I applied for SDE1 job role at Amazon, I am working as an application developer for 9 months. I used to do computer programming more often when I was doing the graduation, but after getting into the job, I'm doing it less often. I'm passionate about learning the security of application, and I'm assessing the application security, and bug bounty programs provide such a great playground to apply the skills I have learned. Apart from that, I am an Arch Linux lover. I use Arch Linux on my personal machine, and I configured it with the DWM as a desktop window manager. It's a suckless program. And I configured my Arch Linux in such a way that you need not touch the mouse. You can literally do everything, almost everything with the keyboard itself, and it increases my productivity. And I'm a blogger and YouTuber by passion, as I like teaching a lot, and blogging and YouTubing provides me the platform to satisfy my desires of teaching. So with that said, let's look at the whole interview process timeline. On the top, I listed the day number, starting with day 0 when I uploaded the resume. So it all started by uploading my resume in Amazon's jobs portal. I came to know that there are job openings for SDE1, and I applied for that job by uploading a resume in the Amazon jobs portal. By the way, I applied for Hyderabad location in India, and Hyderabad office is the largest office in the world and most beautiful office. Luckily, the next day itself my resume got shortlisted, and I got a mail asking me to take an online coding round. So within the mail they have provided a link to some coding platform. It's not HackerRank or any other, it seems like a third-party assessment site, and you can take that assessment within 4 days, I think. So this online coding round contains 2 coding questions and a work style survey questions. So you'll be given a total of 2 hours, and it's usually allotted 1 or 5 minutes for 2 coding questions and 15 minutes for work style survey questions. The first question that I got is based on the priority queue, and it's an easier problem to solve. And the second question is an extension to rat in a maze problem, and it's a medium problem. So I luckily solved both of these questions. Coming to the work style survey questions, they are like an MCQs, but you will be having a slider that you need to slide to specific option. So they are pretty common work style questions, which you can answer it genuinely to get qualified. And 15 days after that, I got a mail stating I was shortlisted for further rounds of the interview, and on the same day an informative call was also scheduled, which explains how the further rounds of interview are going to be. And you'll also be getting another mail containing documents related to leadership principles and document explaining what Amazon expects from an SDE1, and some general interview tips documents. About a week later, I got a call from HR regarding the confirmation of scheduled interviews. So prior to this, I also got an NDA document, which is non-disclosure agreement, which you need to agree for that in order not to disclose any kind of confidential information related to the Amazon. So you need to agree for that document. And in the HR call, you will be ask you to confirm the scheduled interview. So it usually happens to be on the same day. If you're comfortable with the date, you can confirm that. If not, you can propose some date so that she will try to schedule on the proposed date. I confirm to attend the interviews as per the schedule. After you confirm the scheduled interviews, you will be getting a mail containing all the information related to the coding rounds. Usually it used to be an on-site round, but because of COVID, this happens to be an online virtual round. Usually this happens in an Amazon Chime, which is Amazon's online video conference app. So they even share the virtual video conference meeting links as well in the mail. Along with that, they are going to share the interviewers' details like the resignation of them and the timings of the interview, and also they'll share an online live code link which is analogous to a Google Doc, where you and interviewer both can interact with the document at the same time, so that when you type some code, they used to look at the code. So in the second round, which is technical round, so this was taken by an SDE2 at Amazon. So the round started with quick introductions. First he introduced about himself, and then I introduced about myself, and then he activated the live code link. So we directly jump into the coding questions. So he asked it 2 coding questions. So the first question seems like a binary search problem, but it drills down to a TP problem. So I took a while to get the logic, and then I coded it. So you are expected to write a production ready code, meaning try to reduce as many bugs as you can. So this happens to be a medium level problem, and after the interview I came to know that this was asked in a Google on-site round. And second question is based on min heap, so it's also a medium problem. And one thing to note here is you should be writing your own min heap implementation. You should not be using any kind of inbuilt function. By the way, I use C++ for competitive programming, and I use the same in the interview as well. So you are not supposed to use priority queue. I even confirmed with the interview that can I use a priority queue. He said no, you need to implement the min heap on yourself. You should not use any inbuilt function. I happen to write the whole implementation, and I happen to write a production ready code and readable code. So try to make sure your code is readable. And by the way, for both of these questions, we discussed about time and space complexity. We happen to drill down to a more optimizer solution, and after he is satisfied with the expected time and space complexity, he is going to ask you to write the code. And one more thing is, try to speak out what your thought process is, so that he will be able to assess your thought process. And moreover, if you have any doubts regarding the question, just clarify at the beginning itself. And after explaining both of the solutions and implementing them, he asked few behavioral questions. If you don't know what these behavioral questions are or why these behavioral questions are asked, first you need to understand the Amazon's leadership principles. I'm going to read out the 14 Amazon leadership principles, but I can't explain each of these 14 leadership principles in detail because that's going to take another video. So let me read out these 14 Amazon leadership principles. They are customer obsession, ownership, invent and simplify, write a lot, learn and be curious, hire and develop the best, deliver results, insist on high standards, think big, bias for action, frugality, earn trust, deep dive, have backbone, disagree and commit. So these are the 14 Amazon leadership principles. So they are available publicly online. So learn about these leadership principles before attempting the interview, because with the leadership principles, they are going to see if these leadership principles are present within you. Let me tell you the examples of behavioral questions. Tell me about the time you go beyond what company expects in your work. Tell me about a time when you couldn't meet your deadlines. Tell me about the problem that you solve innovatively. Time when you helped someone in their work. Tell me about the time you did boring tasks but completed the task perfectly. Tell me about the time when you failed to meet your commitment. So these are the examples of few behavioral questions. By the way, I'm not going to disclose any actual questions that were asked in the interview because I signed a non-disclosure agreement by which I should not disclose the confidential information. I feel the interview questions are confidential information, so I'm not going to disclose them. And then the round 3, which is also a technical round, happens to be on the same day, and this was taken by 2 SDE3s. So it also started with a quick introduction. So both of these interviewers introduced themselves and asked me to introduce myself, and after quick introductions we discussed more about my projects that I listed on the resume. And they activated the live code platform link, and this live code platform link is unique for every round of interview, and they are going to share this with a mail containing the interview schedule. And then they ask it 2 coding questions. First question happens to be a matrix problem, and it involves some kind of bit manipulation as well. By the way, I solved this problem before when I was reading the cracking the coding interview. It contains actually 189 programming questions which I have prepared long ago. It happens to be that one of these questions came from that book. I first given the brute force approach and then given the optimal approach, and we discussed about the time and space complexity of it. After they are satisfied with the space and time complexity, they asked me to write the production ready code. So I have written the code that is bug free, and then we get into the second question. The second question is also happened to be a matrix problem, but this involves some kind of binary search in a matrix, and that happens to be a medium level problem. And again, the same way, first I explained the brute force solution and then I explained the optimal solution and return the code. And after solving these 2 questions, they asked it few behavioral questions. By the way, the second and third rounds, which happens to be our technical rounds, are going to be assessed independently. It's not like only if you clear the second round you will be eligible for third round. It's not like that. Second and third round, which is both technical rounds, happens to be assessed independently. Even though you didn't perform well in the second round, you are going to have a third round as well. Depending upon the feedback given by these interviewers of these 2 rounds, they are going to decide whether they are going to proceed with your candidature for further rounds of interview or not. After around 10 days, I got a mail that I have cleared the first 2 technical rounds. So they scheduled the next 2 rounds, which happens to be a hiring manager rounds. Usually hiring manager rounds of round 4 and round 5 used to happen on the same day. Because of COVID, these 2 rounds also happen to be on Amazon time, which is a virtual interview. So this round 4, which is a hiring manager interview round, was taken by a software development manager, and it all started with a quick introduction. He introduced about himself and I introduced about myself. And then we discussed in depth about my work at a previous company before joining Amazon. We had more discussions about what technology I use, what projects I use, what design architectures I was involved in, and how I'm going to develop the applications and what my job role is, and a lot in depth about my previous work. After having a discussion for a long time, he activated the live code platform link, and by the way, this will also be shared via the mail just before the interviews. In this round, he asked the 2 technical questions. One is based on low-level design question, and the other happens to be an SQL database design and the query. And regarding the second question, which is SQL database design and query question, so he will give some context. For example, let's say there is a company where there will be employees and there will be a department, so such that you need to design with some few assumptions, and he will ask some queries like for example, I need the maximum tenure of an employee in each department. So such a queries. Okay, it's not an advanced database design thing, it's a basic database design and query stuff. After these 2 questions, he asked some behavioral questions. So coming to the low-level design question, I should not disclose the actual question, but I can share you some examples of how these low-level design questions used to be. So for example, he can ask you like a design an airport service that will be used to allocate a free runway when the plane is about to land. So you are supposed to build the classes and objects and how the interaction is going to be on different objects, and you need to implement with OOPS concepts, so object-oriented programming concepts. And a few more examples are like to design an online card name, let's say for example poker or any other games like Snake and Ladder or any other games. And another example is like a design a parking lot, which is well known example, and a couple more examples are design CSV parser, design recommendation engine, so this kind of stuff. Okay, and the round 5, which is also a hiring manager interview round, this is taken by 2 software development managers. So of course it started with a quick introductions. They introduced about themselves, I introduced about myself, and in this round also we discussed more about my previous work, like what technologies I work on, and what are the different skill sets I have, and also some challenges I face within my work, and similar work experience related. And after that they have activated the live code platform link, and then he asked it 2 coding questions. So the first question is some kind of tree transformation. You will be given some binary tree, and you need to perform some operations on the tree such that you need to transform it into a different tree having different connections. So this happens to be a medium level problem. I was able to come up with level auto traversal based approach with which he was satisfied. So we discussed about time and space complexity, and then I was asked to write a bug free code, which I have written in C++. After completing the first question, he then asked it another question based on doubly linked list, and this is also of a medium level. Sorry for not disclosing the actual questions because I feel this is a confidential information, and I signed an NDA not to disclose any kind of confidential information related to Amazon. So sorry for that. And after that, he asked a few behavioral questions. After 10 days, I got a call from HR, and I'm curious to listen that single word, which is congratulations. And she congratulated me for getting selected for SDE 1 role, and she asked me to submit some pay slips and some documents about my current employer. After 5 days, she again called me. We had a discussion on salary negotiation, and we had finalized the joining date. So now let's look at my interview preparation. I actually started my preparation after the first round, which is an online coding round. After doing both of those questions, I feel confident that I'll be getting shortlisted. So I started preparation. Actually, by the time I applied for this job, I was already working in another company. So every day I used to get a couple of hours for preparation, and in few days I was able to do the work quickly and able to manage some time for preparation. So between the round 1 and getting a shortlisted mail, I happens to have approximately 7 days of preparation. You can accumulate all those hours that I get across these 15 days between the round 1 and shortlisted mail. My preparation started by looking at the previous Amazon interview experiences in Geeks for Geeks. In each interview experiences, I have gone through coding questions and what kind of questions usually will be asked in each round. And after solving few interview experiences, I felt confident that I was able to solve the coding questions because I was already a computer programmer, and I thought of revising my CS fundamentals because in a lot of interview experiences they are asking the CS fundamental questions, which I have read long ago. And also I revised the technologies that I work on. The technologies that I use at my work is .NET Core, Python, MongoDB, Apache Kafka, Google Cloud Platform, and Azure. Coming to the technologies that I use in my personal projects, I use Angular, Golang, PostgreSQL, Docker, and gRPC. So I work on microservice architecture. Even my personal project is on microservice architecture. I use gRPC for the internal communication of microservices in my personal project. And since I have 9 months of experience at the time applying for this job, so I can expect some questions on the technologies that I use. So I have revised all the technologies once again, so to be on safe side. After getting a shortlisted mail and then formative session, I revised my DS and algorithms and also their implementations in C++. By the way, one resource that I have used it for my DS and algorithms revision is the book, name it Cracking the Coding Interviews. It contains 189 programming questions which are important for the coding interviews. Since I got only less time for the preparation, I haven't gone through each page of this book. The thing is, I bought this book long ago. Then what I did is among these 189 programming questions, I filtered out few questions and I documented few questions which I feel interested and which I feel I need to revise. So I have documented them along with the C++ code. Along with that, I have also documented some implementations like try implementation, min heap implementation, sortings, and all this kind of stuff. Even I revise it, segment trees. I know some approach with which you can easily write segment trees in few lines of code. I have read this from the code forces, and I use it frequently when I was doing computer programming. And this book kind of prepares you for the interview. This is the best book that I can recommend for cracking the coding interviews. This was written by Gail Lachman McDowell. She is the founder and CEO of Career Cup. If you have gone to the HackerOne some tutorials, you might have seen her. She's on both sides of the hiring table, and also she worked for pretty long in Google, Microsoft, and Apple. This is the best book that I can recommend. And one more thing is, you go through this book only if you have time. If you don't have time, I don't recommend going through this book. These 189 programming questions covers across all topics that are relevant for coding interviews. Few chapters like puzzles which are not relevant in these days. For the interview, you can skip those kind of chapters. It's not only the programming questions, but also it will explain how to behave in the interview. It even contains a preparation plan which you can follow. So it kind of explains in detail about every single topic. And even I learned about time and space complexities, how to calculate them even for complex problems from this book itself. This is one of the best books that I have read so far. And moreover, in the interview, I got a couple of questions from this book. If you're interested, I'll put the link in the description below so that you can get one and go through that. And with that said, and I also spent some reasonable amount of time for practicing behavioral questions, because you can't get direct answer in the interview for every single behavioral question. It's not like answering them with a single line of answer. So with the behavioral question, they will try to assess some leadership qualities with the work experience that you have in the current company. So there is a strategy to explain any kind of behavioral questions. It's a STAR strategy. S stands for situation, T stands for task, A stands for action, R stands for result. So situation is about the context. Let's say if you ask what is a challenge that you face at which you solve it most innovatively, then situation explains the context in which you got the challenge, and task is like what you're going to optimize, are you going to increase the throughput of some application, or what is the task, what is your actual task. And action is what you have done to achieve some output. Result is by applying this action what you got. This is a STAR strategy. By the way, in this book she even explained how to answer the behavioral question, but she used SAR pattern. She kind of mixed S and T together. If you are referring to that book, don't confuse with that. That's almost the same. It's all about how you are going to present the story for each behavioral question. I got around 4 days of hours for preparation between shortlisted mail and round 2. After round 2 and 3, I have gone through some low-level design stuff and gone through some design patterns and revised some DSN algorithm skills, and also revised some CS fundamentals. So with that said, this is the best book that I can recommend. So do check that out. Trust me, I never regret buying this book even till this point. But you need to know how to prepare and when to use this book. If you have only less time, you can use this simply as an encyclopedia to simply refer to the topics. So with that said, I will provide even another resource. First, try to solve those 189 questions provided in the book. So if you have time, then I suggest going through this lead code top interview question collections. So it contains 3 collections: easy, medium, and hard collections. So depending upon your level of confidence, then you can start with any collection you want. This is one of the best resources that I can suggest as well. But I highly recommend to solve this 189 questions. These kind of covers most of the important coding questions that covers across different topics. So after doing this 189 questions, I suggest you to go to the top interview questions in the lead code and solve this. And by the way, only do it when you have time. If you have less time, I highly recommend you to go through few questions of each topic and try to know how to implement them, because in the interviews you're also expected to write a production ready code. And finally, some tips. Every interview process will start with a resume. Try to make your resume single paged. If you can't fit everything in a single page, then go to a second page, but highly recommend you to constrain it to a single page, because the interviewer will lose interest as you increase the pages. So if it was a single page, then it looks fine. And moreover, projects are important thing. If you're doing some project, you might be using some kind of version controlling like Git. So host that in a GitHub, use that as a remote repository, and put a hyperlink to that GitHub project in your resume and make that clickable, because interviewers are going to look at your projects. And if possible, put a detailed description in the readme file of your GitHub. If it happens to be some kind of command line related project, then take some screenshots and put it in our readme file of our GitHub repo. If it was able to deploy somewhere, then deploy it and put the URL link as a hyperlink in your resume, so that this will increase weightage of your resume. Interviewer also get impressed by that. And if you have some Android application or some kind of mobile application, along with the link of your application in the resume, try to put some metrics like how many downloads you have, how many active users you have, how much traffic you get, all these kind of metrics. If not, then that's okay. And while practicing, try to implement it in Google Docs if your interview is going to be on virtual round, or in white paper if your interview are going to be an on-site round, because usually we'll be habituated to write the code in online code editors where you'll be having some auto completion features and some syntax highlighting features. But while coming to docs, you won't be having any such kind of auto indentation feature or auto completion feature or syntax highlighting feature. So instead of directly experiencing that in the interview, you can practice a few questions by writing the code on the Google Docs or writing in a white paper, so that you won't feel uncomfortable when you're facing this in the interview. And have a stable internet connection for online interviews, because if your audio is breaking in middle of the interview, it kinds of signals a red flag for the interviewer. Even though it's a technical glitch, it kind of puts a negative impact on the interviewer. Try to maintain some stable internet connection, at least while your interviews are going on. And one more thing is, even if you solve the problem before, pretend as you didn't see that before, because why should we have to lose the chance? You know, if you say like I have already solved this problem before, or if you straight away given the most optimal solution, then the interviewer will give you another question which might be harder and which you might not get approach pretty quickly. So why should we have to lose a chance? I happen to get a couple of questions which I have already solved. These questions were directly picked from those 189 programming questions in Cracking the Coding interview book. I have already done that before, but still I pretend I didn't seen that before. And I first proposed the brute force approach, and then derived the most optimal approach, and then I have gone through the code. And most important thing is speak out your thought process during the interview, because your interviewer need to know how you're approaching a specific problem. He need to know your thought process. Depending on which, he is going to assess you. If you got stuck, then they are going to provide you some hints, and they are going to help you for sure. And try not to use as many hints as possible, because this again kind of signals a red flag. And moreover, at the end of every interview round, interviewer going to ask, do you have any questions? Try to prepare some questions that you need to ask the interviewer upfront before the interview itself. Asking questions kind of increases the positive signal in the interviewer's mind and can enable him to give you positive feedback. And also, if you're doing some kind of prompted programming, or if you're preparing for interviews, you mostly tend to use inbuilt functions, for example SDLs in C++. Try to practice implementing data structures on your own instead of using the inbuilt data structures or some kind of STLs in C++. As you have seen in the second round, he asked me to code priority queue on my own. It's kind of a min heap on my own, so that will be helpful there. And one more thing is, when you have time, try to solve all the 189 programming questions in the cracking the coding interview book, and document all those codes at one place so that you can quickly refer. I'm insisting so much because it kind of covers every topic that is important for the interview. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you like this video. Please like, share and subscribe. Till the next video, stay tuned and stay safe.